like to say good morning, everyone, and greetings from Macau. Well, today is the second day of International West Asia Congress of Tourism Research. So, as you see today, my topic is about eye tracking studies in the hospitality. Despite the name of this session is about eye tracking studies in hospitality, particularly in my today's presentation, I'm going to mention about menu design. Basically, that's what I'm going to focus on. So today, basically, my presentation will have four parts. In part one, I will explain basically the key terminologies in eye tracking. And then in the second part, I will be covering brief breakdown of menu studies and what we know about eye tracking studies in menu design. In part three, basically, I will share with you one of my recent papers findings, and I hope that this will be useful. And I think this will take up to 25 minutes. Okay. Well, let's talk about menu. Well, as you know, if you do not live under a rock, I think anyone knows what's a menu, and possibly in your life you have been engaging with menu in your daily life. And from the customer perspective, it is important. We all use menu. I mean, this is one of the items that we use in our daily life, regardless of the style of the restaurant. It's a well-known item. Of course, this is from the customer perspective. From the restaurant perspective, menu can be regarded as a salient salesperson of a restaurant, as Pasevic stated, because menu is an important tool for the restaurants. Like, it can be considered as a communication tool. This is the way you communicate and make your consumers aware of what you sell. Equally, it can be used as a promotion tool because you may have a new item. By the way, it should be reminded at this point that in our conference we have a gastronomy section and gastronomy papers, and we also have hospitality management. And I believe this presentation might be important for them because it is important to manage our menu, because your product might be really good. However, the presentation of the food matters as well. Well, having said that, adding another benefit of menu would be, it's one of the quality indicator. By checking the materials on the menu, we may also see what is the quality of the place. So menu is important. Of course, maybe a conventional approach is collecting questionnaires from the respondents. However, there is also other ways, like we may use eye tracking machine. And basically what this machine does is that it measures where your eye looks and how long it does. I should also add that if you are planning to have any eye tracking study, it is slightly different than collecting a questionnaire, because here basically your main target should be measuring the attention. Where do customers pay attention? And before I continue my presentation, it will be useful to mention basic terminologies. You can recognize these three terminologies as the ABC of eye tracking. The first one is fixation. Fixation means where the point that you look. Let's consider that spot A. And the saccade means that the movements of eye between two fixations. That means you look at the A point and then B point. And scan path basically reveals the visual patterns, if you have any. Let's say where you look first, like A, B, D, C, E points of your looking. This is of course important because not only for individuals, you can also detect whether the group, as a group, whether the people have tendency to pay attention to certain stimuli or certain area. Going on and moving on, how this technology works. I'm not going to put in detail, and basically I'm going to explain I will give you surface information. Basically, what happens is that the eye tracker sends out near infrared light. And then secondly, this light reflects into your eyes, and those reflections pick up by the eye tracker. And of course, through filtering and calculations, basically you can calculate where the subjects look in every moment. And there are also different types of eye tracking devices. In our study, we use the screen-based one. And the second type is basically eyeglasses, so eye tracking glasses. And also, as I mentioned, screen-based glasses are popular. And of course, these devices are a bit expensive. If, as a researcher, if you want to buy, I think you may need some funding. Moving on, the advantages. If you are planning to conduct a study on eye tracking, there are some advantages, despite the main purpose of the study is measuring maybe some of the attention of the subjects. However, by using eye tracking machines, you may also reveal some unconscious behavior, and or given that this technology is new, it is also explanatory and exploratory. It may also explain why people look for certain areas, and of course, but to do this, you need also other quantitative measures to support these assumptions. And I'm going to mention another important aspect is offers visual representation. I'm going to share with you very soon the visual representations. It makes it so simple to understand and interpret the data. However, of course, on the other side of the coin, eye tracking also has some limitations. One of the limitations is that when subjects are being observed, they may change their natural behavior, and this is called the Hawthorne effect. Basically, this is also important when you collect a questionnaire. However, apart from that, in eye tracking, especially if you are focusing on a stimuli that is culturally or based on people's values is sensitive, people may avoid looking at those areas. Another limitation is looking versus seeing. Well, the machine basically shows where people look. But of course, while they are looking, we may not know what people think. Maybe they are thinking what they are going to eat at night, not the food itself. So basically, if you are planning to conduct eye tracking studies, it basically shows where, but not why. And as I said, if you want to identify why, then you need to supplement, you need to use questionnaires to supplement or complement your assumptions. Now it's time to share with you some of the commonly used eye tracking metrics. The first one is the heat maps. Heat maps basically are the visualizations, which shows the general distribution of the gaze points. And while doing this, it uses green, yellow, and red colors. And red color shows the intensity. It means, especially in this figure, as you see, it means subjects mostly pay attention to baby's face. And the other green areas also shows that there are some attention points. Given that I have mentioned the purpose is to find out where people pay attention, exploring gaze points is another we do in eye tracking studies. But of course, apart from where people look, the sequence of where they look is also important. What's the first point they look? What's the last point they look? These are important factors in eye tracking studies. Another indicator of attention is the revisit. If a subject repeatedly looking at the same spot, that it shows us that the subject has interest on the particular stimuli, and that's why we may check. And lastly, another indicator is the duration. If you are paying attention on something and longer time, this shows that you have some intention or you have some motivation on a particular stimuli. Okay, it down. Now I want to talk about menu management, and based on a review paper, current review paper, basically it is really good, detailed, so much detail you can find in the paper. Özdemir and Çalışkan listed 5 segments in menu management. As you see, menu analysis, pricing, planning, operating, and designing. And I'm going to basically elaborate the menu design part. And menu design part, by the way, I should also mention in menu analysis, pricing, and planning and operating, basically the researchers focus on how the pricing or changing item influences the item selection. However, in menu design studies, apart from how much you are going to sell the product, where you locate the price can also influence consumers' choice. The available studies on menu design basically shows us that once you change certain type of stimuli, it also changes people items. As you see in this example, nutrition information leads people choosing healthy options, or adding a picture of sea to a menu increases the fish consumption, and these findings are confirmed by the prior studies. Similarly, other manipulations also show significant results on item selection. Like now we know that labeling or wordings, when you change the menu price, menu labels, or the layout, basically influences on item selection. Narrowing it down, now let's talk about sweet spot and the sour spot. From the menu design perspective, identifying sweet and sour spot is important. And sweet spot basically means that where your customers look first, last, and the most. And the sour spot is the opposite, basically where people don't pay attention. This is important to know for any hospitality marketer, because your customers do not have a default meal decision. Their choice will be depending on where they look. It's not going to be somewhere else, because if they didn't look at it, it's not going to be in their reality. It means they didn't see it, and they are not going to order. Of course, there is a psychological mechanism that explains the sweet and sour spot. Before I continue, I think it will be useful to mention short and long-term memory. We have long-term memory, which is permanent, and our short-term memory, basically the capacity varies from 10 to 15 seconds. And once we start processing any information, this information stored for 10 to 15 minutes, and then either it's transferred to long-term memory or it fades away. Having said that, this mechanism explained by serial position effect. This means that our recall accuracy of the item may change where it's located. Now I prepared a very simple animation to explain this. Suppose that what you're looking at is the menu items, okay? And this also explained with primacy and recency effect. So basically serial position effect explained with primacy and recency effect. Suppose that you have a menu and you got this. One of the reasons that you may remember the items that in the beginning, because some of the information that you read transfer to your long-term memory, and that is why you may remember those items. And based on the recency effect, we remember the items that placed in the last. And for this, the reason is that suppose you are checking the menu, and once you close the menu, the information is still stored in your short-term memory, and that is why you still remember this information. Of course, apart from this, not only first and last where you look is important, where you pay attention the most also important, because that shows that you have motivation on that particular stimuli. So as a restaurateur, why does it matter to know a sweet spot? Because you can boost revenue by placing the most expensive item, or you can use as a promotion tool by placing new item. You can even use it as loss prevention, because you may place it the low demand items. We know that food turnover is really important in hospitality and gastronomy. Or you can boost profit. The most expensive item doesn't mean that it is the most profitable. So you can also, if you know the sweet spot, you can place it, you can place the most profitable item. Okay, let's move on, because I see that I have 3 minutes left. Let me overview what we know about eye tracking and menu studies in hospitality. In 1970s, there was an assumption that there is a desirable place on two-page menu, and that's basically on the right up corner. And that was William Doeffler's assumption. And similarly, the industry convention also assumed that, basically the practitioners assumed that right up corner is the first look area of customers. Of course, these authors and the industry convention provided this without any empirical evidence. In 1987, a study done by Gallup, and then we have learned that those assumptions were wrong. Despite the study did not identify any sweet or sour spot, based on the scan path, we know that on two-page menu, basically customers read the menu just like they are reading a book. They start from the top left up corner and read down and goes up and down. Similarly, and one of the recent study done by Young, and she also used a traditional Western style restaurant as a stimuli, and she also looked for the sweet and sour spot. Just like Gallup report, despite the study didn't find any sweet spot, from the scan paths we can see that just like Gallup, it shows how people read the menu. There is one more thing to mention about this study. As I mentioned, although this study didn't find a sweet spot, the study indicated that the number 6 restaurant information has been indicated as the sour spot. That means consumers don't pay attention to that area. This is the last study, and as I said, there are very limited number of studies in this area. This study conducted by Choi et al. In Korea, authors investigated different menu layouts, and moving to the conclusion, the sweet spot, the first look, has been identified in the two-page menu, just in the center, in the middle area. However, I should also remind you that these researchers did not use eye tracking machine. They basically posted the menus, and people indicated where they look. Moving on, now what I'm going to share is one of our recent topic. The sweet spot is in the eye of the beholder, exploring the sweet and sour spots of Asian restaurants. So basically, I'm going to share 2-3 more slides, then I'm going to finish. I see that my time is up. Okay, I'm going to explain what we've done. We have 2 steps. In our first step, basically, we design our menu, because first we need to ensure that the menu we design should be the same as original menu in the market. Basically, we use 2 websites, and then we collected 232 menus, and then analyzed and generated our own menu. And then we test how it looks by using Likert scale, and we see that our respondents identify our menu as original. And we use GP, guess point eye tracker, to measure eye movements. And we use 2x2 factorial design, which means we use both portrait and vertical. Portrait P and vertical for V, and horizontal H, and we have also landscape L. Moving on to directly our results, I see that, as you see, these are our results. From the result, as you see, there are 3 types of menu that we have identified: the sweet spot and sour spot. Of course, evaluating this together, using portrait vertical looks better than using horizontal. And as you see, the landscape horizontal one, as you see, the first glance, last glance, and frequently most viewed areas, we also identified the sweet spot. More of this, as you see, the second area in 3 types of menu, we see that sweet spot exists. Therefore, in Asian menu, if you are using one-page menu, we are suggesting to use horizontal text and landscape menu design, and second part known as the golden area. And of course, I would like to finish my presentation by providing future path. As you see, first time we identified the sweet spot on one-page menu. Of course, my suggestion, given that this area is new, it is better to focus on common menu page layout first, and then we may identify when you use different design, how does it influence the food choice. Similarly, you can also use website because the space is different and the reaction of subjects to a different space and stimuli will be different. And I would like to finish my presentation suggesting also most common devices that we use in our daily life would be fruitful. So basically, as I said, overall, this area is really virgin, and more research is needed to also even to justify our results as well and compare. Well, I'm happy and glad to be here today, and I'm ready for your questions if you have any. And thank you very much for your patience. And I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.